In part 1 of our 3-part recap of Insomniac's entire Spider-Man series, we covered the events of the original game in great detail, though there's still a little bit more to that story, of course. Spider-Man's 3-part DLC, The City That Never Sleeps, was all put together a pretty meaty additional chunk and one that was pretty eventful. Not only does it set the stage for the events of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, it also sets up some secondary narrative threads that are very likely to be picked back up in the upcoming Spider-Man 2. Here, we're going to recap the entire story of Spider-Man's The City That Never Sleeps DLC. The City That Never Sleeps first episode, titled The Heist, is set not long after the ending of the base game. Some months have passed, and Peter has been spending that time talking with Miles about his newfound spider-like powers. At the same time, however, trouble is once again brewing in New York City. Wilson Fisk and the demons are gone, yeah, but once again they've left behind a power vacuum that others are now looking to fill up. Chief among those new contenders for the city's criminal throne are the 5 Magia families of New York, who are all fiercely competing with each other to climb to the very top. Against the backdrop of all of this, as part of her work as a journalist for the Daily Bugle, MJ, who's been investigating the Magia families, learns that one of the families intends to break into and rob an art museum. In particular, there's one painting being kept in a museum that was seized by the NYPD in a recent raid on one of the Magia families, which they now intend to recover. As you might imagine, upon learning this information, MJ informs Peter. And so it is that Spider-Man finds himself in that museum not long afterward. And sure enough, he finds it teeming with Magia goons. Doing whatever a spider can, Spider-Man dispatches his enemies and makes his way over to where the painting is being kept, and soon realizes that he's been beaten to it. He finds himself face to face with none other than Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat, who also made a brief appearance in the base game itself and of course has had plenty of run-ins with Peter over the years. But Black Cat, as it turns out, has no interest in the painting itself. She breaks it in half, revealing that she was only there for a thumb drive hidden inside. With the drive now in her possession, she quickly makes her escape. Spider-Man leaves the museum as well, and thanks to new information uncovered by MJ, learns what exactly just went down. MJ tells him that she's tracked the drive's location and that it's now in possession of the criminal boss known as Hammerhead, who's one of the 5 Magia Dons, implying that he was the one who hired Black Cat to steal the drive. As it turns out, each of the 5 Magia families is in possession of one of these mysterious drives, and Hammerhead has hired Black Cat to steal the 4 that he doesn't have. To find out what exactly is in the drives, Peter tracks down Felicia, but when he asks about the drive's contents, she tells him she doesn't know. She does tell him, however, why she agreed to work with Hammerhead in the first place, and it seems like she didn't really have much of a choice. Felicia tells Peter that she has a son, and he's very strongly led to believe that he himself is the father. More importantly, however, the boy has been taken captive by Hammerhead, who's threatening to kill him if Felicia doesn't steal those thumb drives. With that bombshell, she departs again, leaving Peter stunned. As he's reeling from that shocking revelation, however, he learns more new pertinent information from MJ, who's managed to figure out why Hammerhead wants those drives so badly. As it turns out, a long time ago, as a means of keeping the peace amongst each other, the 5 Magia families pooled all their assets together and then split up that share into 5 pieces, with each family keeping one of them in hopes that they would all keep each other in check. Hammerhead intends to claim all 5, effectively taking the other 4 families out of the equation, leaving New York all for himself. By now, Black Cat has managed to steal 3 of the 4 drives, but now knowing where to go, Spider-Man rushes to the location of the 4th in hopes of stopping her. Once again, however, she beats him there, leading to a chase across the city, at the end of which Spider-Man is finally able to catch up with her. At which point, he's able to convince her to not go through with her plan, and help Peter take Hammerhead down in exchange for helping him save her son, something he feels an additional responsibility to do, given that he believes the boy to be his own son. Felicia tells Peter that not too long ago, Hammerhead purchased a vault that he stores all of his high-end valuable items in, and tells him that she's quite certain that's where her son is being kept as well. Spider-Man is able to uncover the vault's location, and the two of them head there together. Upon reaching the vault, they also realize that Hammerhead and his goons have stolen all of the Sable International weaponry and technology that was impounded by the NYPD after the Devil's Breath incident, which of course means they're now going to be pretty heavily armed. Unsurprisingly, Spider-Man ends up having to fight plenty of Magia goons, and when he does, he finally makes it inside the vault, He learns that he's been fooled by Black Cat yet again, because what was being kept in the vault wasn't her son, but the fifth drive, Hammerhead's own. Felicia tells Peter that she's been giving Hammerhead fake drives, and then she now has all 5 in her possession. What's more, she doesn't have a son at all, having made up the whole story so that Spider-Man would have been tricked into helping her. And with that, she flees from the scene. Peter is able to make his way out as well, though not long afterward he learns that having found out Black Cat's betrayal, Hammerhead is now out for revenge, and he's rigged her penthouse to blow. Peter tries to get in there in time but is unsuccessful and watches as Felicia's penthouse explodes, seemingly killing her. That's where the first episode of The City That Never Sleeps ends, paving the way for the second episode titled Turf Wars, which picks up the story just a few days after episode 1. As the second DLC episode kicks off, chaos has erupted all over New York. Armed with high-tech weaponry of Sable International, Hammerhead's family has the clear edge over its enemies, and in response, the other 4 Magia families have joined forces to take him and his followers down. With the city caught in the middle of a full-blown gang war, Spider-Man is also working with the police in a much more direct manner. He learns from his friend on the force, Yuri Watanabe, that the NYPD has learned the location of one of Hammerhead's bases, and that there's a good chance that Hammerhead himself might be there. With Yuri and a squad of cops, Spider-Man heads to the base, though it turns out to be a trap and turns into an absolute bloodbath. Hammerhead mows down the entire squad and manages to escape, leaving Spider-Man and Yuri as the only survivors. That, as you might imagine, isn't something that Yuri takes very well. She is left deeply traumatized, and telling her that he will make sure Hammerhead is caught, Peter asks her to take some time off so she can properly grieve. But things don't go exactly to plan for him. He learns of a couple major steps that Hammerhead is planning on taking. For starters, he intends to abduct the other 4 Magia Dons, his main rival in his bid for power. In addition to that, Peter also learns that Hammerhead is after something known as Project Olympus, though details on what exactly that is remain elusive. Choosing to focus on the more pressing concern, Peter works with the NYPD as he attempts to stop the abduction of the other Dons. He fails, and later finds himself fighting against Hammerhead's forces, who are attacking NYPD convoys throughout the city. While he's distracted with that, however, Hammerhead breaks into the police precinct, which is where Project Olympus, a Sable International weapon of some sort, is being kept. Hammerhead kills several cops, steals Olympus, and flees. In the aftermath of this series of disasters, Yuri is, as you might expect, not happy. Frustrated with the lack of progress that Spider-Man and the NYPD have made in their attempts to bring Hammerhead in, she decides to break out on her own and go after him all by herself. She tells Spider-Man that if he tries to intervene, she'll have him arrested, before then going on to brutally gun down several Magia henchmen. Following this, MJ does some digging into Yuri's past and learns that her father used to be a police officer as well, though he was dismissed from the force and arrested for taking bribes from Hammerhead. In her own career as a cop, Yuri has been moving precinct from precinct single-mindedly focused on Hammerhead, presumably fueled by her own personal vendetta. Back to the story at hand, however, there are more pressing matters at hand for Spider-Man to deal with, because, as it turns out, Hammerhead intends to execute the 4 Magia Dons that he's abducted and broadcast it live to all of New York in a bid to firmly cement himself as the new criminal kingpin of the city. Spider-Man rushes to the location, and though he's able to save the 4 Dons, it's not long before Hammerhead himself crashes onto the scene, and crashes really is the right word, because he's now equipped himself with Olympus, which, it turns out, is a massive exoskeleton that's made him even more dangerous. Somehow, Spider-Man manages to defeat Hammerhead, though before the NYPD can move in and put the criminal under arrest, Yuri arrives on the scene, fueled purely by revenge by this point. Yuri shoots Hammerhead in the head, though Spider-Man intervenes at the last second, causing her bullet to miss its mark and hit the metal plate in Hammerhead's head, leaving him only unconscious rather than dead. Later, in the back of an ambulance, Hammerhead is tased back into consciousness by one of his goons, who was disguised as a paramedic. Here we head into the third and final chapter of The City That Never Sleeps, titled Silver Lining, which, as its name suggests, brings Silver Sable back into the fold. By the time episode 3 kicks off, Yuri's been kicked off the force, and by now she's fully turned into a ruthless vigilante who's been executing Magia henchmen all over the city. But that's the least of New York's problems, because by now, Hammerhead, who's recovered from Yuri's gunshot to his head, and his goons essentially rule over the city, thanks to the Sable weaponry that they've got in their arsenal. Meanwhile, MJ has also discovered the full extent of what Project Olympus is, an initiative that was jointly funded by Oscorp and Sable International, meant to create super soldiers through the use of experimental exoskeletons and bioenhancement technology. But Silver Sable has no intention of sitting back and watching her technology be apprehended and used by Hammerhead. While more importantly, she also needs that weaponry for herself since her country, Symkaria, is currently caught in the midst of a civil war. And so she returns to New York and promptly afterward is met by Spider-Man, who's all too familiar with her knack for causing chaos and pouring gasoline on already explosive situations. This time, in fact, he's able to convince her to work with him. Eventually, they manage to track down the location of Hammerhead, though when their paths cross, things once again don't go well for the good guys. By now, thanks to the Olympus exoskeleton, Hammerhead has managed to turn himself into a full-on cyborg. Spider-Man and Silver Sable take him on, with the latter even using her jet, though Hammerhead proves to be too powerful for them. The fight goes from bad to worse, and just as things are looking dire for Peter, he's rescued by someone he'd never expected to see again. Black Cat, who'd faked her death, arrives on the scene and rescues Peter, managing to escape as Hammerhead takes Silver Sable captive. Felicia apologizes to Peter for everything that's transpired between them amidst this whole Hammerhead mess, and gives him one of the 5 drives that she'd stolen earlier, telling him that it holds the information he needs to be able to beat the Magia Dawn. She leaves, and Peter immediately sets out to find and rescue Silver Sable. He manages to track her down not long afterward, finding her being held captive by Hammerhead's goons in an underground hideout in the sewers. After defeating the goons, the two of them discover, thanks to Felicia's drive, that the steel plate inside Hammerhead's head is sensitive to heat, which means if they can melt it and leave him vulnerable, they'll be able to defeat him. They proceed to outfit Silver Sable's jet with a powerful laser, following which they once again take on Hammerhead for round 2. A climactic fight follows, but together, Spider-Man and Silver Sable are finally able to overpower Hammerhead. The fight ends with Silver Sable melting the steel plate in his forehead, and while he's vulnerable, crashing her jet right into him, finally downing him for good. Afterward, with the threat of Hammerhead and the Magia families finally having been dealt with, Silver Sable returns to Symkaria with all of her weaponry and equipment in tow. In a post-credits scene, it's also revealed that Peter has started training Miles to become the new Spider-Man and protect New York by his side. And that's where the City That Never Sleeps ends. When we return for the third and final part of our full recap of Insomniac's Spider-Man series, we'll talk about the events of Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales paving the way for the upcoming Spider-Man 2. Hey, did you know that we at GamingBolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.